Vladimir Putin has sought to exploit a British statement that it would supply Ukraine with tank shells made with depleted uranium, arguing that the delivery of the armor-piercing weapons would prompt a Russian response. The Russian leader's comments, made during the visit to Moscow by his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping, came in response to a parliamentary answer given by a junior British defence minister in the House of Lords on Monday. Annabel Goldie said that the UK would supply armor-piercing rounds which contain depleted uranium to Ukraine with its gift of 14 Challenger 2 tanks because they are deemed highly effective in defeating modern tanks and armored vehicles. The comments began to circulate on Russian social media channels on Tuesday, and the Russian leader chose to refer to them after a meeting with Xi. If all this happens, Russia will have to respond accordingly, given that the West collectively is already beginning to use weapons with a nuclear component, he said. Putin did not elaborate, although the Russian leader frequently makes nuclear-related threats, largely in an effort to persuade Western countries to limit their interventions in the war in Ukraine, which was started by Moscow's invasion last year. Meanwhile, Sergei Shoigu, Russia's defense minister, said there were now fewer and fewer steps left before a potential nuclear collision between Russia and the West. Moscow also has its own SVINETS-2 depleted uranium tank shells in its stockpile. Britain responded by accusing Russia of deliberately trying to disinform. Depleted uranium has nothing to do with nuclear weapons and capabilities, the UK Ministry of Defence said, and said it was a standard component used by militaries including Russia itself. Depleted uranium is a byproduct of the enrichment process that makes nuclear fuel and weapons, and so is less radioactive than the naturally occurring metal, although concerns remain about its toxicity. The waste product is used to make penetrating tank shells because it is 70% more dense than lead. Similar munitions were used by the UK and the US in the Iraq and Gulf Wars in 1991 and 2003, and a recent review of studies in BMJ Global Health highlighted possible associations of long-term health problems among Iraqis linked to depleted uranium use on the battlefield. An analysis from the World Health Organization concludes that, in some instances, the levels of contamination in food and groundwater could rise after some years, and should be monitored, and recommends cleanup actions be taken where depleted uranium contamination levels are deemed unacceptable by qualified experts. However, an overview by the International Atomic Energy Agency says there is a lack of evidence for a definite cancer risk in studies over many decades, while a Royal Society study from 2001 concluded the most significant cancer risk was faced by soldiers in a tank who survived it being hit by a depleted uranium munition. One expert, Alistair Hay, an emeritus professor of environmental toxicity at the University of Leeds, assessed toxicity data shortly after the Iraq War but said that a firm evaluation was difficult because there were so many other variables. The CND leaders said the UK should instead place an immediate moratorium on the use of depleted uranium weapons, a demand the Ministry of Defence has repeatedly rejected, and to fund long-term studies into their health and environmental impacts.